AM 630. WMAL.
7:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, a huge, very big day in the nation's capital with the Supreme Court handing down the ObamaCare ruling at about 10:15, somewhere like that. And then we also have in the House of Representatives a vote on contempt of Congress against the Attorney General. That's all taking place today, right here in the nation's capital. Thought it'd be a good day to check in with Congressman Steve King of Iowa, who serves, by the way, on the Judiciary Committee in the House of Representatives. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Well, good morning, Brian and Brian. I'm glad to be on this morning.
Let's talk about the contempt citation, first of all. It looks like the Republicans largely will vote for contempt, and it'll be joined by, one hears, somewhere between 20 and 30 Democrats on that matter. As I said, you serve on the Committee of the Judiciary. You also serve on the subcommittee that studies the Constitution. There really are big constitutional issues at play here, are there not?
Well, there really are, and this question goes to the oversight authority that Congress has over the executive branch of government. And with Eric Holder, I think by now it's pretty clear that he has information that he thinks is embarrassing either to him, to the Justice Department, and potentially to the President himself that he's blocked from Congress. And that is a clash and a struggle between the two branches of government. But in the end, if Congress can't do oversight over the executive branch of government, we have got a constitutional problem. I don't know if it's yet a constitutional crisis, but it's heading in that direction. I hope that can be averted.
I don't think that Congress has ever really gotten to the bottom of Fast and Furious and who thought it was a good idea and how high up it went. But this fight that is developing now really has to do over the fact that Congress sent a letter, the Justice Department sent a letter to Congress, which was misleading. It was inaccurate. It just had wrong information in there. It made certain assertions that just simply were not true. And basically they let that linger for some 10 months. It would seem to me that's a clear-cut case where Congress has the right to find out, why did you tell us an untruth? Why did you lie to us?
Well, Brian, that letter, I would go further and say I would call it a red herring letter. It was written to direct Congress off the path of an investigation, to tell Congress that there wasn't anything going on with Fast and Furious, that to try to get Congress to walk away and let it be. So that was you can make an argument that it's a stronger violation than that, but it clearly was designed to direct Congress off the path of the investigation. When that happens and you actually pick up the real scent, then you have to follow that scent to wherever it leads you. And now, as the president has asserted his authority, that says to me that there's information that most likely has been prepared for the president's eyes. I don't know if he's seen information with Fast and Furious or a potential on the cover-up side, but when he exerts his executive privilege, then that tells me that there's a path that likely leads into the White House.
All right. There's also the thing that happened a couple of weeks ago that's kind of been put to the side because of expected ruling on Obamacare and because of the contempt hearing about, and the Arizona ruling as well. What the president did when he basically did a backdoor dream act, went around Congress and said certain people can stay here and we'll give them a chance to get a work visa. One hears that you may be trying to do something to stop that, a lawsuit against the president. Is that right? And how does that work?
That is correct, and I am committed to this. When I read the news story about what was at that time reported to be an executive order by the president that he was going to create new classes of people and exempt them from the law and refuse to enforce the law and manufacture a work permit for them out of thin air with no legal basis, even though Congress has established all the work permits and the visas, it was clear to me that he's crossed the line into Article 1, legislating by not really actually executive order, but by executive fiat in the form of a memo that Janet Napolitano put out. The constitutional scholars that I work with, and I'm serious, all of them, agree with me that the president has no authority, no constitutional authority, and if we can get this case heard on the merits, then I believe we will succeed in court. And I'm going to ask for an injunction to suspend that executive order and vacate it. That executive edict / memorandum and vacate it. Somebody's got to stand up for the Constitution. Somebody has to lead on this.
Is it now? Would you be suing on behalf of Congress, or you be suing on behalf on yourself? I don't quite understand how it works.
Well, there's always, whenever you go into a federal court especially, there's a question of standing and whether a person's been actually injured. I think that we're all injured. Everybody in Congress is injured and offended. Everybody in America is injured and offended and damaged by the damage the president has done to the Constitution. But there are others that want to join the suit, and I think we will have a list of plaintiffs that someone along that category will certainly have been directly and individually injured by this case, and that gives us the standing, hopefully, to get into a federal court. If we can do that, that's where I believe that we succeed on the merits.
So the key in this argument that you're making is that Congress passes a law. It's signed into law by a past president. It becomes the law of the land. And yet you have an executive branch which now chooses to say, well, there are some parts of that law I agree with, and there are some parts of that law that I disagree with it, so I'm going to instruct my administration to enforce the parts that I agree with and ignore the parts that I don't agree with.
That's all true. In addition, he has manufactured a work permit out of thin air.
Yeah.
And that's no basis in law for that whatsoever to agree or disagree with. And that's a complete fabrication of the executive branch that he cannot fabricate law out of thin air, whole cloth, or anything else. And I have gone to court in the past against the chief executive. At that time, it was our Iowa governor, Tom Vilsack, who attempted to do a very similar thing. And when we got into court, the judge agreed with me, in the case of King versus Vilsack is in the books.
Now, all right, on that front, though, Marco Rubio has come out and has said basically that he agrees with the president's policy, just disagrees on how the president went about it, and said, it's more must be done, and it has to be done by Congress. Are you completely against the idea of allowing certain people, maybe somebody who was at the age of 4 brought over here by their parents, allowing them to stay in the United States in some form or another?
Well, before I respond to that, I need to say that this subject has shifted from immigration now to preserving the Constitution, and I'd like to think that Marco Rubio would join me and others in clearly defending the Constitution and then having a discussion on immigration separate from that. But the DREAM Act argument is the strongest argument that the open borders proponents have. And if one were to grant those provisions of the sympathy that comes from our heart and not necessarily from our good judgment, then we would have opened the door for more and more to come in. I think there are a lot of problems with how you would identify, do background checks, categorize, and avoid fraud. And I don't think anybody has been able to respond to those satisfactorily at this point. I think we need to focus instead on let's get our operational control of the border, shut off the sanctuary cities, shut off the jobs magnet, reestablish the respect for the rule of law. And at that point, then I could have that discussion about the classes of people that have been created by the president's executive edict.
Well, Congressman Steve King, Republican from Iowa, we really appreciate you joining us here on this very important news day.
This will be a big day as it unfolds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.